You can hear me.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, then I'll be smooth, smooth, smooth.
And do I sound much louder now, Phil?
Yeah, you're matching.
Okay,
If
cool.
I'm matching volume with Josh, you're matching volume with Josh. We should all be neck and neck.
Great.
Wicked. Ooh, new questions. I haven't looked at them yet. Mean. Oh, these are great. These are.
Get your guys' audio back up. Going on, everybody. Good afternoon. Let me see who we have in the chat. It's a little quiet today. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dungeoneers Pack Live. I am Josh. Thank you guys for joining me today. Today, It's been a while since I've actually had some guests on. I've been running solo for a little bit, trying to get back into the swing of things creatively. But I'm joined by very two familiar faces and friends of the channel. Can you guys introduce yourselves? We'll start
Go
off
ahead,
with
Phil.
Phil, and then we'll go with Jordan.
Oh, okay. Hi. I'm Phil Kearney. I just posted hello in chat. You can click my stuff and go see all the different 5e game mechanics I develop here on stream. I write books, I illustrate them, I do page layouts. So I come up with ideas, I spool them all together, and then I publish in the DMs Guild or onto my Patreon. Yeah. Hi.
Hey, and I'm Jordan, aka Flutes. I'm with Flutes Loot. We made flutesloot.com. My wife and I started out as a blog, expanded to YouTube about 2 years ago, and we kind of cover anything to do with TTRPG, specifically D&D 5e as our wheelhouse. But she does a lot of lore. I do a lot of mechanics, and then we also intermingle those. And so, for Patreon, for example, we just made a dryad playable race where she did like this artwork for it and like got it all together, and then I just kind of like proofread it to make it like mechanically sound. So we're a good team. So I'm just here by myself though. But if you check out some live streams she and I recently did, we finally actually got on camera together for like the first time in like 2 years for our channel. So go ahead and check those out too.
That's right. Yeah, she's the one behind the screen, right? Always. Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't like making videos as much as I do. She's more of the writing type. But yeah, when she does do videos, they're really good. She's very talented.
That's awesome. Definitely go check both of them out. I'm gonna update the bottom doobly doo after this is all done to get all the links and stuff set up. All right, so today we're going to be talking about Session Zero. So this was requested in the Discord, but it's something that always kind of tends to pop up, and it's one of those things that everybody mentions and says you should do, but never has a clear, concise way or explains exactly what you should be doing for Session Zero. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be discussing our perspective and our experience and how we run Session Zero. Because I think the three of us, I could confidently say we probably have similar ideas. It's just obviously it's going to be molded to whatever our table and our play experience and the play experiences we're trying to build for our table, um, as determines how we actually run our Session Zeros. That's where our differences will be. So I'm going to start with the first question, and if you guys have questions in the chat, go ahead and drop them there. First question is, what is the goal? Excuse me. What is the goal behind running Session Zero in your experience? You want? I'll start up with Phil and then Jordan.
Sure. I think the the most useful thing I think that Session Zero can do is define the parameters of the table, and then mold the expectations inside the game. Like, are we planning on doing a game for 2 or 3 months, or is this a multiple year campaign? Are we locking each other in to commit as companions for however long we decide to keep this thing running, or are we looking at a limited engagement? And then what's the hard specs that go into that decision? So, I mean, in the most vague of general terms, which I think we'll probably go into deeper.
Yeah, and then for you, Jordan.
Yeah, for me, I was trying to think how could I sum it up as quickly as possible. What are the goals behind running Session Zero? To me, kind of two main things: prevent future problems and maximize fun, maximize enjoyment. Like I think everything I came up with in regards to Session Zero is about one of those two things. So those are my goals with Session Zero.
Yeah, I'm stealing a term that's commonly used in the Commander players sphere in the Magic the Gathering. They refer to it as the what's called a social contract. This is what you're kind of building for your group. It is the social contract. So, and it dips into both exactly what you both said. It's to set the parameters on what exactly your expectations are for the game, where you're going to feel the most comfortable and have the most fun, and also within, I would say, developing your social contract. It's determining what tools, what homebrew rules, in order to maximize your fun. That's really what it comes down to. I think one of the things that people tend to forget when you are setting up your Session Zero, and as though it's like the big controversial point, I guess we can bring up immediately, get this one out of the way, is the use of safety tools. This is something that, for whatever reason, there's a subsection in this community that really gets upset when you bring up safety tools, and that's the whole purpose of Session Zero. And it's like, that's not really the case. So first off, do you guys actually use them at your table?
Should I just go first and just roll in that order? I and then L, I and then L. Okay. My current home team is our coworkers. So for HR compliance, I really do need to pay attention to people's safety valves and potential emotional triggers, because not only may they not want to be in the game, but if shit really goes sideways, it could end up being in HR. So absolutely, and it's just become a good practice of just making sure, what are things you're uncomfortable with. Like we can go down the bullet list, but absolutely, I have to just for compliance at work.
And what about you, Jordan?
I do use them. I'm not super strict on them. I do like what Sarah from the Hype Goblin provided. I did a one shot, like a 3-session thing on Tabletop Bob's channel, and Sarah was part of that with me. And she just gave like a really easy to use Excel or Google Doc where everyone can kind of check their boxes of like what they're okay with or not. And I appreciated that, just making it really like streamlined and really quick for the DM to reference, what's not okay or what isn't. Even though Tabletop Bob's channel is like very much, friendly and not weird, But regarding safety tools, it's one of those things where I think a lot of us who don't have things that like make us uncomfortable in the game we might think, oh, well, why doesn't everyone feel the way I do? But it only takes one instance.
Yeah.
I was pretty early on in my game when I was a player, and I saw the DM like make someone physically uncomfortable to the point of like reacting physically to it. And ever since then, I've always just known like there's just some lines you don't want to cross with people, even if you think it'll be fun. You're trying to have fun as a group, and there are just some things people don't want at the table in their life. It's a and I think a lot of people can relate to this. So, because I think there's often an overlap with people who resist safety tools and with session zero, who also say, and I'm losing my train of thought, but let's see if I can get back on it. There's an overlap where they say they don't really like the safety tools, but they also say, I just lost my total train of thought. I'm sorry, guys. I had a good thought, but basically, you only have to have it matter once, and then you got to have that sort of thing in mind so that everyone's having fun at the table. And it's not about people being triggered or anything like that. It's just because that's a term that means different things to different people. Like people have trauma. They have things they just don't want to deal with. Like I remember now. There's an overlap with people who also want escapism in their game. They don't want like politics in their game, but they aren't very open sometimes to what are other people's form of escapism. Sometimes it's something simple, like they just don't want spiders. Like that just creeps them out and it gets them back in their head, And it's not really our place to judge. Like I've heard very few stories, but I don't like to make like the 1% of stories the rule, where people kind of abuse this and make it difficult on the DM. They just treat everything like it's just not okay, and then the DM's got to talk to them, right? But far and away, it's worth using them. I mean, just like Phil said, you're playing HR compliant, and even with your like best friends, sometimes there are things you don't know about, or things can change, right?
Yep.
So, like you could be 3 months into a campaign and something happens in someone's life and they're in the middle of a session and they're just like, wow, I'm not okay with this like I thought I would be. Life changes and life comes at you fast. So for the sake of not rambling, I'll call it there. Let's go to you, Josh. What do you think?
I am one of these spoiled ones that doesn't have to use the safety tools. I've been playing with the same group of guys since what came out. It was the second campaign they put out was Princess of Apocalypse. Same group of guys. We've sort of built this social contract with each other. We kind of know where to push and everything without really having to talk. We have very similar humor. Some of them like push that humor just a little bit too much, but it's not enough that I can't broadcast that game. I will tell you that, but it's one of those things that we know where the line stops. But it doesn't mean I'm gonna advocate to say that you don't need to use safety tools. I think it's an important tool, especially if you're playing with new people. And it's do you have to use them with in my situation? No, but you should use them if you're going to play with new people and kind of feel people out and kind of get to know them. You probably should have some sort of protocol in place just to kind of feel. And if that bugs enough people that they don't want to be a part of the game, maybe one or two people, maybe that's the good call. You shouldn't have them at your table either. If they're only concerned about their fun and not the overall fun of the entire group, that's a good sign for you. Everybody's an important player at your table, and that's another thing that was session zero. That actually leads me to the next topic: is what are things that you do for your session zero that you're not brought up on the topic?
I'm sorry, what's that question?
What are things that you do for your session zero that you see that are not brought up on your topic? The reason I want to lead into this is because I'll start off with it. One of the things with session zero that I do that's not brought up, and I see it's not discussed a lot in the YouTuber content creator sphere, is that the DM is not really considered the player. They're considered the group leader. They're considered the one in charge of everything. And I think that's that while that stems from the very Gygaxian era of dungeon mastering, I don't think that's the case anymore. I think DMs now are getting reinforced that you are another player at the table, and you're not necessarily the leader of the group at the table. You don't have to put that hat on anymore. There's not that pressure anymore. The DM's fun is just as important as everybody's in the group's fun. Is just they have a different role to play at the table. and that I think that leadership of having to be the group wrangler does push people away from being a DM that would probably be really good DMs that they're more story driven and stuff. And it's okay for other people at the table to kind of step into that leadership role of wrangling your group, especially if you set that up in a session zero sessions. Like, hey, I want to focus on as a DM, I want to focus on just creating the world, reacting your stories and stuff. I only have time for this, and somebody else take the hats of making sure scheduling who's gonna show up on time, who's gonna coordinate drinks, food, whose house we're gonna play at, etc. All the little extracurricular stuff. I think that's never really brought up. I think there's still that vestige of the old school DM that's still an expectation in the community.
Mhm.
Yeah, we'll start with you, Jordan. What do you think? What do you do that's different? That's not really brought up in these
First of
discussions.
all, I want to completely agree with you, Josh. I've
Definitely.
given some pushback when I've been the DM where people have said like, "Oh, this and that," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's a good idea." And they're like, "Oh, will you text them and let them know?" And I was like, "Why are you making me the middleman? You don't need me as the DM to send this text message. It's okay for the group to talk without me triggering the discussion. So it is a kind of weird part of the game, and I'm not sure it's totally based on like Gygaxian relics, because even new players that come into it, they just have this perception of like the DM runs the show,
Yeah.
and they kind of fear stepping on your toes. So there's a lot of different reasons it happens, but yeah, I try to end that lately. I don't have the patience for it. I already have to juggle so many things as the DM, and so when I'm a player, I try to jump in when there's scheduling errors. Like, hey, are we going to reschedule this? Like we don't have to wait for the DM to respond. Let me get this ball rolling.
Yeah.
And get that going. Some other thing is how do you as the DM want feedback, and how frequently? That's a good way. Like do you want it like immediate in the session, or is that going to throw you off? Do you want it afterwards verbally? Do you want it just maybe you have a document where you can just have people anonymously enter? I don't know, but that's a good way to set an expectation. Is how do you as the DM want feedback as you're going? And then scheduling and duration is a big thing. Like, how long are we going to play this campaign? Is there an expectation that you could kind of switch characters during the campaign, or is like lock in one character, and if they don't die, we're hoping to take it for 6 months, a year? How frequently, that sort of thing. I really think it's good to nail that sort of stuff down, as well as how is character death going to be handled? Because I've realized that not everyone is my style, and there's some people. I think my wife is part of this, where she puts a lot of effort into a backstory for a character, and if the character is going to die, especially in a way that she doesn't think is fair, but that's a different topic, then that just creates a whole lot of work, and she almost would just rather stop playing. It doesn't mean that she doesn't want any danger, though, so it's a balancing act. But it's good to talk to people and say, do you want character death to always be on the table, and you don't mind rolling up a new character? Is anyone going to be upset? Like, obviously the DM wants to be fair. No one wants to feel like the DM just wanted to kill my character today, But how will character death be handled? I think that's a good one to suss out at session 0. What about you, Phil?
I watch a lot of D&D commentary, and a lot of tips and advice stuff as just background sound, just to keep my head in the game all the time. And so I caveat saying that I think probably every idea I have about session 0 came from somebody else at some point. So I don't. I guess I can just state that there's a lot of variety and different takes on how to do session 0. So if it's something you're interested in, just do a search for it. You'll find a ton of really cool content out there. So I think having said that, the thing that I perceive as the least discussed topic is what kind of assumptions is the DM bringing into the session 0 that they haven't really checked themselves on? Like, do you know everyone that you're playing with? And like in Josh's example versus my HR example, I had an open table where I don't necessarily know you, and that's why we're doing this. But in Josh's case, and in most of my history, these are people I went to high school with, or college with, or I'm a roommate with, or I've been adventuring with them for, like in Josh's case, years. I don't need a session 0 for these guys because they're my godparent, they're my kids' godparents. I trust them with my children. That kind of level of, we're solid. We know what fun is. Let's go get drunk. But if you're bringing people in that you don't have that with, then obviously you have to use a lot more kid glove. And leading back to what I was talking about, understanding your assumptions about what kind of a game you want to play. Like 5e, more than any other version of the game, has encouraged character agency, yet provides least in the adventures that they provide, as opposed to first edition, which was, hey, here's a map and there's this demon thing in the basement, go for it. And like, that's all they give you. But they don't even care who your character's name is. It's like, we expect you to go probably through 4 or 5 characters just getting one shot by dumb traps on your way there. The idea that you have a backstory is ridiculous. So, like, there were user interfaces to engage in a mental escape room. Is basically what first edition D&D was. It's like, I'm going to describe a room to you, and there's probably 3 or 4 things in here that are going to kill you. So if you can figure your way out of the room, we're going to do it in the next one too. And that's like first edition D&D. There you go. Map it yourself. I'll explain how the room looks. And 5e is like the exact opposite. Like, we have a ton of guards and rails and descriptive narrative elements so that you can express your character's opinions and attitude. But we're not going to assume that you're going to pick a fight with the big bad evil guy. So he's going to show up and throw some weight around, and he's going to disappear, and you'll see him in the third act. Like, there's like a really big difference there. So when you're a DM and you're going into that, what assumptions do you have about what the game is even going to be before you start that session 0? Like, do you know you're running Curse of Strahd? Do you know you're doing a hex crawl? Do you not care? And you're going to let the team decide what they want to do. So, and like, do you hate social engagement? Do you ever use voices? Does your whole team expect it? I love doing tactical stuff. I love politics, and I love exploration. But you really have to really get me into the mood if I'm going to use like voices or like even care what your backstory is. Like, I expect you to not have a backstory and create it based on what happens in the story. It's like, oh, if I have this backstory, it can couple with this new guild that you're introducing. I know a guy there. It's like, cool, that's a way you can build your backstory into it. But that's the kind of assumptions I have, as opposed to a player that I might not know comes to a table with 2 pages of backstory, and he wants to make sure that he's going to have an opportunity to play that into whatever story I have. And if we aren't seeing eye to eye to that right off the bat, then almost everything else that we do is going to end up with the campaign exploding. So that really kind of leans into, Jordan, what you were saying about making sure that we know what our expectations are even going into it. So anyway, ramble enough. I'll pass.
You made me think of a few other things that I didn't think of beforehand, but are good to cover. One is, how much is homebrew okay? Like, when I'm making a character, should I make a character that's just rules as written, or should I be like, hey, I'm making a character that's not really optimal in this way. Can we change this subclass as written to just be a little bit better since I'm making a suboptimal choice? Or does the DM just say, I don't want to deal with that, just please go rules as written, and we're not going to do that? And then there's also like progression style. Are we doing experience points or milestone or what? That can also kind of inform the play style somewhat, because experience points is a lot more oriented towards like micro achievements, and if it is experience, you need to ask the DM, is it going to be just monsters for experience, or is it like a social encounter as experience, and then is it just a little experience, or is it like on par with monsters? So those are also good questions to be asking as a player. That's the other thing, is like, we often say like, what DM, what should you ask? Like, but you as a player need to have these expectations too, and think to yourself critically, okay, if we're doing this, what does this mean that the DM might be making an assumption about that I'm not picking up on, which you kind of mentioned as well, Josh, was like these assumptions. The DM doesn't know what they're assuming until you point it out. Yeah. And so that's like the hardest thing about session 0, is a lot of the guidance on it makes the DM need to assume a lot of things, and there's not a lot of like, how do you identify what your assumptions are? I'm making a whole Excel spreadsheet right now of just like every variant rule or like unclear rule I've ever encountered, and it's over 100 right now. So that a DM could just go through and just be like, yes, no, and like hand it to players, or go through it like someone's playing a thief. Oh, are any of these related to a thief rogue? And yeah, there are. Let's cover those. I'm trying to remove the assumptions from the DM who doesn't necessarily know what's coming and try to like enable them. So I'm like over a long time trying to develop this spreadsheet. But then you also brought up Curse of Strahd. That was the first time I used a physical safety tool where I handed it to players like, here's a list of the stuff that might happen. What do you think? Because I was like, this might get kind of heavy. And then you brought up voices. That's actually a really good point to be like, DM, are you going to do voices? Because just as an expectation, because my dad is running Tomb of Annihilation for me right now, and he doesn't do voices. It's just not his strength. And sometimes I'd be like, Dad, was that the NPC talking to me, or was that just you like out of game? Like, am I role playing back? And he'd be like, oh, sorry, I really didn't know. And so he tries to find ways to cue us when like our character is being spoken to, as opposed to him as the DM speaking to us. Like weird little things you kind of find along the way that you don't think of. And so that's a good one, is the voices to figure out.
Yeah. Most definitely, because there's a level of immersion when it comes to voices and not using voices. And normally, if you're not using voices, you kind of have to make it clear that this is the character is talking. So, and then if you're used to talking in a voice in first person, then it's a lot easier and clearer, because obviously the voice dictates and helps people decipher who's doing what. But if you're as a player and then your DM is going in, they're just talking in their normal voice, that definitely can get confusing. So as a DM, if you plan on not doing voices, just make it clear, a little bit more clear, like if it's you talking, if it's you, the DM, talking as table talk, or it's the character talking to the players.
Another thing on that is player voices. I don't know if you've ever done this, but sometimes it's important to use some kind of voice or a cue, because sometimes a player may be speaking in character to an NPC and being like, this is so dumb. But like if I, Jordan, was just like in the middle of our game with everyone just being like, this is so dumb, like someone might mistake that for me saying like the game we are playing is dumb. Like, so keep those sorts of things in mind, especially if you're playing online. Oh my goodness, if you're playing online, these things are like heightened to the max. These communication cues, man.
Philip brought up a question that actually brings up another thing I see that I do, that at least when I DM, and it's regarding character death, but also potential multiple session zeros. I'll bring up his question. Do you think there should be pseudo session zero if a player has a death and rolls a new character? I think session zero never stops at prior to session one. You should be doing these things constantly, as ways to kind of check in on your group. And also, I would even say, if you're a player, you can initiate a session zero and be like, hey, can we have like a session zero, or just a non-game session, kind of talk about what the heck's going on in the game, especially if you're not happy with the direction, or not happy with certain events that are happening in the game, or certain things are coming up in life that are changing how you're reacting and adapting to the game, or maybe it's just stuff that's happening in life that's preventing you to physically actually be able to play, things like that, or it's events in the game like you need to make a new character, and trying to weave it in. If a player takes initiative with that, and if I'm a DM, I'd be more than happy to be like, yes, let's sit down and hash out your new character so we can weave them into the game as much as possible.
Not only that, but another thing you could cover at session zero is if you're open to more players joining. Because your friends might be like, oh, my friend is going to ask me, like, should I tell them, like, yeah, we're keen on it? And then are you going to have a little half-hour session to help them make their character cohesive? Is it a new player altogether where you need some more time to help them? But yeah, if there's character death, I think that's a great time to trigger. They can make like maybe a character concept, because they already know, they were there for the first session zero where you kind of covered a lot of the backstory and all that stuff of like what the setting is, and they played in it, so they kind of know where they can kind of insert themselves. But as far as like inserting themselves into the party in a way that makes sense, you might want to just meet a half hour early for your game and be like, hey, I've got this character, can we like sweeten the deal here and figure out some details that can really help with the group.
100% agree. What about you, Phil?
So speaking specifically about like multiple session zeros or like session zero never ends. The way that I have my campaign, I run campaigns from level 1 to 20. So we start a game, and then it typically takes about 240 to 280 hours for me to go through a 20 level campaign. It doesn't matter how long the session is. Like if you have a 4 hour session or a 7 hour session, or right now I have 1.5 hour sessions. This is the fourth. This is the fourth 5E campaign I've ran that's gone from level 1 to 20. We're at 16 right now. They all come in between about 240 to 300-ish hours, so we're in that zone. So habits I've picked up out of that is every tier, like session zero, level 1, session zero, level 5, session zero, level 9, session zero, level 13, or well, anyway. I keep going between like 1 to 5, like scaling by 5 ranks or 4 tiers. They're different. But like level 1 to 4, and like 5 to 9, and like 10 to 16, and like 17 to 20. When you're hitting those different power points in your character's career, I absolutely have a session zero about how we feel about the campaign so far. What are you most excited about pursuing for the next X amount of levels that I can be building into? Like real meta conversation stuff that makes sure that we're all still in sync. Like, are you enjoying the amount of interaction that's happening? Do you want more time for your character to develop? Is the amount of combat that we're having clipping along for you well? Is it too trite, or is it taking too long? Do we need to adjust those the pillars so that we're optimizing the amount of shenanigans that we can squeeze in between them? That kind of stuff. But then on top of that, I started a while ago. When we gain, I have all my characters gain levels at the same time. I mean, it's the 5e thing to do, but I've been doing it since 3rd edition. It's just once they restructured XP to be coinciding, so all the characters are progressing together as part of the D20 mechanics in general. That's when we started doing an entire like X amount of like my games are typically 3 hours. So we could take an entire session, run through our characters. Like it's time to level up, kick ass. Let's sit down and let's build our characters together. At session 1, if you build a cohesive team, they're going to automatically want to fight with each other and against each other. And then every time you level up 1 to 20, it's like, what am I getting this level that I have an option to, that I can completely build a fireball special or something out of? Like my Colossus and your Wolverine characters are gaining 7th level right now. What can we do to make them work better together?
Yeah.
Or what gaps are we finding in our encounters? It's like, well, if we had somebody that could boost our intelligence checks, that would help all of our Arcana stuff like a ton. Does anyone have a resource that we can do that with? It's like, yeah, let me have my artificer build a thing that's going to give you a boost. It's like, okay, cool. Then that's what we can use to cover. So yeah, 20 of these level ups together, and then you've got each tier together. It's like it becomes an event. Like the players, like, we're not going to play the game at all right now. We're going to talk about how we play the game right now, and like what's the cool stuff I've seen a ranger do recently that I want to see more of. Like that really grounds them into, and like with a 20, like that's months of game that you're planning on fulfilling. So it's like, I'm making a commitment to you for the next 250 hours to have you kick through this idea. What do we need to do to make sure we all stay together barring natural disasters? And having like those frequent event check-ins where you're just like completely decompressing from the game is like huge value to keeping people at the table. Sorry, rambling, but yeah, sorry.
No, it brings up another thing I think that is never really talked about in this space is playing to the table, not just as a DM and as a player. Both sets of players pretty much playing to the table, especially when you're building your character, and then that helps informs the DM of like what kind of threats and stuff they can throw at them and new challenges, and it has the DM be less adversarial and more of another way for them to play into the story and help build the player's story, as well as have the players not come into conflict with each other, but come into conflict with the world that they're playing in. I think even in like being a content creator that primarily focuses on character builds, it's still a mindset within that niche that you're taking your own character and bringing it into a group instead of building with the group and playing to the table. So, and that's one thing I try to be aware of is like when I do my builds, especially if you're going to use them and bring them into like session 0 and stuff, is that you're playing towards your group. You're not playing a solo game that's just gonna. You're playing Iron Man that just so happens to be on an Avengers mission. You're pretty much gonna be a member of the X-Men, and everybody's cohesive. So, this brings me. I want to go to the next question. This is a complete opposite, the complete flip side. What are some tips and helpful other content that you've seen that about how to run session 0 that you've either implemented or see that hasn't exactly worked out?
Yeah, for me, encouraging, it's usually like, it's not that like the guidance doesn't work, but it's usually the guidance is incomplete. Like, for example, encourage your players to make backstories that like make them work together and they know each other. I've had several campaigns where I say, hey, I got to go to the bathroom. If you guys can just talk for like 10 minutes while I'm gone, just figure out some ways maybe you know each other, whether you're siblings or what. And I come back, it's like no one talked about it. Like, for some reason, it's like pulling teeth for me to get people to, like, they can kind of get a backstory from themselves, but the minute you want them to like combine their backstories in any way, people just shut down. So that's one thing that hasn't worked very well. Another thing is I've straight up said, like, this is Curse of Strahd, this is a dark, grim thing. Let's make characters around that. And then someone makes a joke character, and I'm like, what? And so, like, even when you express yourself, like, what do you do then? Like, are you gonna say, like, no, don't do this character? It's gonna be a problem. Like, you have to know how to like adjust. Like, if someone didn't listen to something at session 0, that's another thing. Like, how are you gonna adjust to it? And then another thing is conflict, where I've said, we talk about session 0 never ends. I once, in the middle of a session, like I stepped out of like what was happening in the narrative, and because there was PvP very imminent, and I stopped and I said, hey everyone, like, what's going on in the game right now is probably going to end this campaign. Like, I don't know if you perceive it, but you guys gotta like figure out how your characters are getting along right now. And it still didn't work. Me saying that. Like, I have a video about that as like one of my worst memories that I had to work with, And so it doesn't always work. Like, session 0 isn't a foolproof thing to prevent all problems, and there's some trial and error with it. No matter how much guidance you read about it, we always talk about, like, not always. We earlier were talking about how a lot of things are put on the DM shoulders. Well, handling those conflicts defaults to the DM. And if you're a DM just trying to tell a story, but like in IRL, you're not great with conflict resolution. You don't know how to communicate and help people resolve those things. Like, session 0 isn't going to help you unless everyone's like on board with the mindset of like they're trying to make it easier for the DM. And so there's just some things you got to remind people, like, hey, we're trying to play a game and like hope for the best. And so, like, it's not foolproof. Like, there are still problems that pop up.
Yeah. What about you, Phil?
I would like I said earlier, I watched a ton of content about like just running the game and in general, including session 0. I would say one proof of concept, since the question is, what did you implement that that you got from these videos? Up until 2005, everyone that I'm a forever DM. So having said that, everyone that I would run a game for, it was all in meat space, and we were still using game shop bulletin boards to find people because in 2005, Let's Play forums were just really starting to gain momentum. So it's iffy if you'd find somebody or not. So the bulletin board was still the most reliable way to do it. And when you got a catch, then it was everyone that's already playing. We're gonna go get drunk with the guy that's new, and if at the end of the night we're laughing more than we're looking at each other, then you're in the team. But at that point onward, then I started using Zoom, and all my stuff went digital like almost all the time. Even when the pandemic hit, my meat space coworkers, we're all work from home now, so that's now on Zoom too. So, but I started meeting people online who I really didn't know, and that's when I actually really started, and that's when YouTube stuff started cropping up, and all these videos about how do you run a good game. It was still pretty thin pickings before 2005, if I recall correctly. And that's when I was starting to look for. I was like, I don't know this guy. Like, I don't even know what kind of car he drives. So how am I supposed to make sure I stay on the rails with him? That's when my education really began, which was when it's like, you're not. I don't know your 8-year-old sister's name because she keeps harassing us at the table. It's like, you're strangers to me. I need to build some railings because I'm getting some weird people showing up and I don't know what to deal about it. Like all the stuff that I have about progression and like HR compliance and like hitting the triggers and even asking about social versus combat. What's your preferences? Like all of that I learned from watching, like how to quantify it. I learned from YouTube videos, all of it. So before that, it was just beers and pretzels for me. And it's like, we mow each other's lawns, so let's go play. So it was a big culture shift, huge culture shift.
Yeah, Jordan hit on something for me. It's that I've seen in discussion that I know just generally doesn't work, and it's that session zero is the answer to party conflict or preventing party conflict. And it's like that's not the case. It is another tool and it's not a tool just for the DM. It's a tool for the play group to implement to prevent conflict. But you're never gonna really be able to still do that if you don't have clear and effective communication. And that's just the big thing. It's not, and it shouldn't always have to fall on the DM. If the DM has so many plates that they have to kind of keep spinning at the same time, if you're a player, you only have to really focus on your character. What is your character doing with their group? What is how are they going to help inform and kind of guide their own role play and the story of the other players, and kind of do that. You have a lot more time to kind of step up and step in and be like, hey, the direction this is leading into a bad situation. Can we take a step back and talk and take that off your DM shoulders? I think there's not a lot of that being said. A lot of it is still goes back to kind of how people see the dungeon master as the head of the table. And I don't see that actually being spoken enough, that players can step in and actually take some of those roles and to come in and that use session zero as a tool, but you're not going to resolve conflict until you guys actually have effective communication where people can talk in a way that they're able to express themselves, but also an effective way where people are actually going to listen. So
And I think it really also speaks to how comfortable are all the players, like how much strangers are all the players to each other.
Yeah.
They're going to express themselves if they can through their character and create those conflicts unless there's like severe padding around character interaction, like one of the dials that you can pull is obviously like PvP, the evil campaign, and how self-interested are you? It's like as a DM, I've got this HR thing going on with coworkers, so I had to build these huge rules. But before that, it was you're all my friends, so we all get together. So even if we get pissed off at each other, we're going to get drunk and and we'll be fine by the time it's next week. Just like pulling the lever all the way up to you have to be allies, you have to care about each other, you have to look out for each other's interests, and you have to be looking for solutions that helps each other, not hinder each other. If you have a problem with that, we're potentially going to run into an HR problem, so you have to go away. Like that is a hard rule, and that way you can just continually cue back into it's like, well, how is that helping your friend? And I literally will say when they want to do something and I detect that there's a potential conflict, I can just flat out ask, how is that helping your friend? How is that helping your teammate in the circumstance? And it makes them go, oh shit, well, tell you what, why don't I do this? And like that has curbed so many potential, we have to walk away at the end of lunch and now I have to prep an assignment for you. Like it's like I have to have like these huge buffers to enforce that if you do that, we got to end this. And like anyway, it's just really interesting about how how much of an impact, like what their social contract with each other is before walking into the game. How much, as you said, that can not matter at all, and having them end up in a conflict with each other when they have no real what's the word I'm looking at,
Yeah.
repercussions for blowing your game up.
Yeah.
Like, if it's just, I'm just going to go find another game on Roll20, then screw you. I'm going to blow up this game because it's not what I want. It's like, wow, that's a flag. Sorry.
You know what's
So,
another thing that came to my mind where I'm a special case is so usually I play in campaigns with like 5 to 6 players. But the first time I ever played, my wife and I, she didn't like it because it was mostly strangers, and I'm a lot more comfortable around strangers than she is. And so she didn't like Dungeons and Dragons for like a year, and then when she tried it again with people she knew, everybody had a blast. And
yeah.
so it's a big deal if you just make your group big just because you know a lot of people who want to play, but they don't know each other. Like, do that
Yeah.
carefully,
Yeah.
Maybe ease them into it. Run a bunch of one shots first, and in smaller groups. Try that. Additionally, right now I'm in a time in my life where my kids are very young, and playing with me often means I prefer to play online for the time being because I don't have to leave my house and leave my wife to watch the kids. But also, just part of the deal is sometimes I just got to step away to change a diaper or help, And to some people, it'd be like, Jordan's away from the computer too much. Deal breaker. Let's just part ways on this campaign, And so, like, sometimes you got to be very clear, like you as a player. Like, I know you want to play, but sometimes you got to say, I want to play, but I know that I'm gonna have to step away sometimes without warning, and do this and that. And right now, my wife and I are both playing in a game. And it's nice that we can kind of tag team where if someone says, okay, Jordan, your turn. And she says, oh, give him 30 seconds. He's just getting the kids some cereal, stuff like that. And so uh, as a player, be very self-aware of what your needs are and what you're capable of giving at this point in your life. Because if you're honest, it'll avoid a lot of awkward situations if people go into it knowing it's going to be that way for you.
And yeah, that'll lead us in the next question. But really quickly, I just want to say thank you, Eric Framinis, for that $2. Thank you, buddy. He said, "I'm late, but I'm here, Lucha." Yeah, we're working on the Lucha lore in the background of all this too. This is looking pretty
Bryce, you
solid.
missed it. We had the session -1 where we all get drunk at the pub together.
Yeah.
So he
Okay.
was talking about the -1 session
Yeah.
later.
Okay. Actually, we have a before I get into the to that follow up with what you were saying, Jordan. Rido has a question. How do you ask about spreading the burden at Session Zero without sounding like you don't have control of the train? Let's see.
Yeah, so without making yourself look like incompetent or incapable, I think just say hey, I really want to focus on what's going to make the game most fun for you all. So there's certain things that if you could just step in when you see an opportunity to just help, because you're a person and sometimes you recognize, hey, I could do this. The DM doesn't have to do this. And maybe just ask for permission, DM, can I handle this? Send me a message if you're unsure. But things like scheduling, if people want to reschedule or whatever, be responsive. If you could just say, hey, I'll always handle the snacks. Either I'll bring them or I'll figure out who's going to bring snacks and that sort of stuff. DM, don't worry about it. DM, you're buying this module we're going to be playing. Do you want any of us to also
Pitch in.
buy some stuff that would be specific to this module that would help you? So that's as a player, but you as the DM, you can ask those things. And I've had awkward moments where I've said to people hey, I'd like to be able to play more often, but in order to do that, I'd like to get some babysitter money or some more snack money. So would you be I kind of like the pro DM thing where it's ask to pay, but I just said, would you all be willing, if we did play more often, just $20 a month, just going towards my babysitter, and anything surplus is snacks or something like that. And it was crickets. And so it's know your audience is part of it, but the worst they can say is no. that old adage. And so anyone else have an idea based on the question or anything I said?
Yeah, I think as a player, there's a big old opportunity to kind of step in, especially when it comes to scheduling. For the simplest thing a player can do is hey, when's the next session? In a group text or in some sort of group message, is hey, when's the next session? And then you can just say, I'm free at this time, and then just toss it over to the next person. That's like a very, very easy thing for a player to do. As a DM, you sometimes just being kind of ripping the band-aid off and just being like, hey, I really need to focus on this thing so I can help build your guys' experience and weave in whatever is going on. Can somebody help wrangle the team together? Can somebody help just wrangle the group? Or and it's just really, as a DM, it is effective communications. For me, has always been clear communication. If you kind of beat around the bush, people are going to make a lot of weird assumptions, or things aren't going to be communicated as clear as you would hope. So they interpret it in a different way. And if you're as clear as possible, but also in a manner that's not aggressive, that can come off aggressive, like you're just kind of telling them they have to do this thing. It's simply asking. You A lot of those worries kind of gonna go away. And again, the worst thing they can say is like no. If that's the case, then that comes to another part. If there's constantly no, that they don't want to hold up that end of the bargain, then that's another discussion where you're gonna have to actually look at the entire play group and be like, do I want to keep playing if this is not causing me to have fun anymore?
Or is that person gonna be in the next campaign?
Yep.
When someone else who's much more eager and helpful wants to,
Mhm.
Something else I just thought of. I know Phil, your turn, but real quick, inspiration is a good mechanic for this. First of all, session 0 is a great time to talk about how you're gonna do inspiration, so that players know. That's a good session 0 topic. But if you say, hey, anyone who's willing to do scheduling and make sure we always are meeting and send a reminder each day, like anyone who does that, just checks that box, will start every session with inspiration. Someone who just take notes every time, and we have a shared Google Doc, and that person just always puts in notes and anyone can contribute. But as long as that person's maintaining it and taking notes each week, start every session with inspiration. So then you as the DM still look capable, but you're making it like, here, I'll mechanically reward anyone who wants to help out with these things that I'm communicating would be valuable to me and is within the player's purview to handle, and just offer inspiration for it. That's a great way to handle it.
What about you, Phil?
That's perfect. I was going to talk about inspiration as a bribe. So I will. I mean, that's brilliant. I will only add that at my table, I allow them to stack inspiration points equal to their proficiency bonus. So, and there's multiple opportunities for them to accumulate inspiration, including things like making journal notes, taking over initiative counts, organizing the calendar to make sure that we're all going to be able to show up. The first person to show up gets a bonus point. So there's multiple opportunities for them to stack up inspiration points. And having said that, I don't know how unusual it is for, like, we're 16th level right now, so they can each carry 5 inspiration points apiece. And we've been doing this for the entire campaign, so it's been snowballing. I don't know who else does this, but if you allow them to just keep spending inspiration points over and over again on, like, an arcane check that they really need to make sure this counter magic pops the way that we want it to. A fun little DM tip I'll toss out there is that how important this task is to them by how many inspiration they're willing to blow on it. Because an inspiration point's a reroll of a d20. So you spend a d20, it's like, I don't like that roll, should we do it again? It's like, and then the whole team's like, should we spend another point on that or not? And it's like, let them stew on it, because that just lets me buffer my campaign a little bit more for when they come up with an answer. But if they spent 7 points on hitting this lock check, you just give it to them.
Yeah.
It's like they're telling you narratively with their economy what's important to them. So I mean, there's like, anyway, yes, inspiration is the best way to bribe them into doing stuff for you, because once they get on that train, they're like, what can we do to grab more inspiration so we can just start dogpiling on something, because they know that they can succeed. If they throw 7 or 8 points at it, all they have to do is get that 19. So anyway, but yes, absolutely, 100% agreed.
One more idea, like another role you can bribe with inspiration is the inventory person. If the group is okay with it, something that often slows down the game is anytime you give the group loot, like everyone goes to write it down, and one person's like, how many gold worth of diamonds was that? But like everyone else heard, so it just kind of slows things down, and then you have to divide up all the gold like 5 ways, like, oh, so how much do we each get? If you're open to it, just embrace socialism in your little group and have one person be like, our total budget, we have 10,000 gold. And someone's like, can I buy armor? And the group says, oh yeah, for sure. Like take what you need. Um, you could even divvy it out as long as the inventory person is doing it, keeps track of who has what. And then when new inventory is brought in, they have like a little thing, a sheet of like new inventory that hasn't been given out to someone, and you can handle it when you have a moment or in between sessions, but you don't have to slow down the game. So an inventory person, I really highly recommend that. I did that with Curse of Strahd, and every little thing, it just really helped having someone have a handle on inventory. That's
me in my current campaign. I'm the inventory guy. Every game I get to be a player, I end up being the inventory guy. But in this campaign specifically, this character, I made it into a character quirk. Like, yeah, he's the group's accountant. He's the one that deals with all the stock and the money. He has the bag of holding. He's holding everything for everybody. So
it's just like with your wedding. You're very prone to accounting.
Yep, that's it's like just take a personal character quirk and just throw it into your character. Eric has a question in regards to conflict resolution that does Session Zero does step into. So I want to ask, because this is something we see very common in the online space, and then I really want to get into before we wrap up. One last question that is going to take a little bit of time to actually answer. So this question with Eric: if someone is a problem, is it better to discuss it privately and attempt to resolve, or publicly berate them and post it on Reddit? Yeah, I will say a lot of those Reddit threads, they're pretty much "Am I the asshole?" threads. A lot of them are. Or I have a problem with so-and-so at my table. The clear and only answer that is always consistently given, and people really should just stop, and they should just have a big header on these Reddits is talk with your DM, talk with your party. It's really that simple. It's just effective communication, clear, effective communication in a way that addresses the problem. And the thing is, when I mean clear and effective communication, that's going to vary from table to table because everybody's different in how they interpret things. But as long as you make it as clear as possible and not come off as you're just directly attacking that person, you're probably going to get a lot done and can solve the problem. Now, if the person's just being a blatant jerk and everybody agrees they're just not bringing it up, somebody should step up and just say something, because you let that kind of stuff fester. It's gonna kill the whole group. And if you could just kind of root that problem out completely, you can still keep playing if it's only a single person. So post it on Reddit? No, do not post it on Reddit. They're gonna tell you the same answer. Yeah. But
it's on Reddit. You have to have pictures. Yeah. Absolutely, like actual film footage would be best of the event actually happening, and so you can post their address with it. That's absolutely dox them. Dox.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, I mean the general rule is public praise, private improvement.
Yeah.
So it's just maintain good management and good military respect. You can harass people. That's also a really good point about how strange are these strangers to you, or how friendly are they? Because if everyone's friends and everyone gets drunk, then peer pressure and social pressure generally cleans up any misbehavior, especially if there's a relationship of like who's your trickster in your group versus who's the guy that generally ends up making the final decision on what your table's going to do when you decide to actually do something like in real life if those are your actual friends. But if you're bringing strangers in that you don't have that history with, then going with that public praise, private improvements, and then formalizing that to be, look, if I detect something going sideways, I'm going to just stop the game, and because I'm doing everything on Zoom now, I'm going to cut the stream. And whatever reason it is that I cut the stream, I'll contact you and we can talk about it privately, but you won't know who it is that we're talking about directly until we can get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
So like that's like like an online disciplinary thing you can't necessarily do in live tables, but honestly I think there's probably more people that have that problem online than there are people that have it at live tables, because for the most part your table is going to be at your kitchen table, which means I already trust you enough to come into my home. So I think that's better advice for online usage, because you can cut the stream, you can just kill the stream. And then, okay, well, there goes the game. What happened? It's like, well, I'm having a problem and I'm trying to resolve it. To everyone, that sounds like it's not a problem at all. But hey, Mickey, We're crossing a line that we'd already defined as a no-go space. Can we talk about that? Because I want to make sure everything's cool. And then if you can resolve it, and he's like, hey, I got my mechanic shit resolved. Mickey, tell me again, what's your next action? And then Mickey is either on board with the ship or he's not, and that should be resolved before you pick up stream again. So sorry, that's like a hard management tactic, but especially if you're using online, you don't know each other, then that's something you can absolutely implement. It's very heavy-handed. If it's just a technical difficulty, that's a good reason for the DM or whoever's supposed to be in charge of social politics inside the party be the one that controls the stream, so you can just force a kill if you need to whenever you pick up a problem.
Yeah,
sorry.
And that brings up another thing. This doesn't just have to fall on the DM. It's anybody that kind of steps into that role in the party. It can also be a player that is okay with dealing with conflict resolution. People have different personalities. They naturally can step into roles. It's not always on the DM. If you're a person that has experience that knows how to deal with conflict in a way that's going to get a helpful solution to continue playing, or just in general with keep the spirits of the playgroup up, don't let the DM doesn't have to do that. You can just step into that role and be like, hey, there's something I'm seeing that's happening at the table. Can we solve it? And then talk with other players too. I would say not privately, like talk with the entire group. If without that person, I would say if they're causing that issue, just to kind of get a feel, and maybe it might be just you getting that vibe or whatever, to make sure if everybody is on board. And then and if that's the case, if it is everybody kind of feels the same way, then you guys can have a greater group discussion with them, and then you take that lead. Because it's one thing to kind of just like bring it up and kind of just dump it on everybody, but if everybody's kind of feeling the same vibe, they're feeling that the same issues kind of coming up, then I would bring them in and discuss with them, and as a group thing, but now also not make it feel like they're on trial. Be like, hey, this is your final judgment. You know, you're getting voted off the island. Yeah. And Patrick brings up another thing that again plays into all this. They have a new DM that kind of focuses on a single player. Any tips? You just got to talk with the DM. There might be story reasons. They might be focusing on one single player a lot because maybe they're integral to this specific arc. You don't really know. And then sometimes the DM just is focusing a lot on that character and they don't realize it. So I would definitely just talk with your DM and be like, hey, is there any specific reason why so-and-so's character is kind of in the spotlight right now? And
I got AFK real fast. All right,
no problem.
I think what y'all said was spot on, like kind of checking the group. Like, is it just me feeling this way? I even reached out to someone, another YouTuber who does a stream, and I said, hey, it seemed like two of your players got, like, maybe they had some bad blood between them, because one of them was kind of making fun of the other one's build, and the other one seemed like he kind of didn't talk after that. Like, was there a problem? And he's like, oh, no, they've played together a lot, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, okay, And so other times when I've been a player, I've asked another player, like, hey, do you get this vibe from the DM? And they'd be like, oh, no. And I was like, I guess it's just me, And so then it's like, maybe I just need to check myself. But sometimes if it is something going on, like, you just say, hey, I don't know if you know that, like, we've been feeling this way. Do you know that? Usually it's like, no, I didn't. I'm sorry. I didn't know, in my experience. And so it's a good way to handle conflict, is just, like Phil said, what was it? Praise in public, improve in private, that management mantra. Like that really is a great way to do it, because then you don't put them on the spot. They don't feel defensive in front of their friends.
Yep.
That's what it comes down to.
Yep, 100% agree. All right, the last question, because it is a bigger one, and this is going to get a little bit more specifics, and it's going to be split into two things. Same question, but two different perspectives, I guess you could say, depending on what role you're at the table. What are some key questions a DM should ask during a session 0 to their players? And then the follow-up question will be, what should a player ask of their DM during session 0? So if you want to start off, Jordan, what should a DM ask their players?
DM should ask the players I'm looking through my list to make sure I don't get the wrong one for, like, DM to player versus player to DM. DM should ask players, my whole list, I feel like I've covered a lot of things that I would say with the DM. I'll wait for the player to DM one, because I have a pretty good list with that. I'll pass for now.
Okay, Phil, what about you?
Okay, that's great because I'm a forever DM, so I have horrible. I guess I have like what I wish someone would ask me, which kind of folds into what should the DM ask. It's like if that's what you want to ask or want to anyway. So, boy, there are so many levers that you can pull on how a campaign runs. Um, I think the most okay. So let's assuming that the social contract stuff is resolved and you've already gone through your checklist of what do's and don'ts, how what at what depth can a relationship be portrayed in your game, like is it all just comrades and hired clients, or are there family relationships, are there romantic relationships, and where do you stop the line on depicting those relationships so that everyone feels comfortable with the narrative space that you have? Like that's like there's like a billion rabbit holes you can dive down those ideas alone. But then beyond that, on the more meta game side of it, as a like I said, I run multiple campaigns, and the way that I like to do it is ask them what kind of a game do they want to play. Like I do everything unless everyone's like, we want to play Curse of Strahd. Run Curse of Strahd. It's like, okay, fine, we're gonna run Curse of Strahd. Make sure your characters make sense for playing Curse of Strahd since you asked for it. And then I'll pull out the elements and let's lock down how much combat do you want, how much social do you want, and how much exploration do you want, and how much space in between do you want for shenanigans. How important is your backstory going to be versus is it just a user interface for you to manipulate the campaign space and you're not looking at building a background? And then beyond that, if it's not a pre-built campaign where we have a rough idea of what the play box is, what kind of a game do you want to run, and what can we do to make sure the campaign space that you're put into is going to support that genre that you want to play, with the pillars that you want to have aligned with, like a big thing is what race are you going to play, how are you depicting your character, because I want to make sure that if you want a lot of social interaction and you're a half dragon demon glow in the dark thing, that's something that people readily will say, how, do you want a beer or do you have proper change because you're holding up the line. Like if I have glowing eyes and everything within 5 feet of me is taking 3 points of damage per round because of my eminence, then I better make sure that everyone's really comfortable being on a bus with you. Otherwise, that character is not going to work in the campaign from level 1 to 20. It will fail around level 12. So, unless you self-detonate the party because you're so goddamn awkward as a character to have at the table. So, if you're going to have half demons that feed off of people's blood to survive, well, then we better build a society where you can claim people for blood. Otherwise, everyone's going to eventually come and murder hobo at you because that's the kind of thing that you're building. So, you have to build that social structure inside the campaign to support the kind of characters they want to depict. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like that's like super like meta code level that if you don't get everyone on board about how those kind of characters are going to engage that space, it will self-destruct when the logic gates start breaking. So you have to build the logic into the campaign. So anyway, the end.
Yeah, it brings up pretty much. It's like like with these Marvel movies, you're trying to build a level of belief, even if there's a level of if you apply some of this stuff in the real world, it actually shouldn't happen. So, and it's just trying to create this level of fantasy around a believability for players to kind of engage with on a mechanical level, so that things can happen. That's why you get stuff like, and Eric's here because you get jump gate with the Paragon, where it doesn't mechanically make sense, but you guys kind of just have to play into it because it just is what it is. You guys have pretty much hit the nail on the head throughout the entire discussion in terms of what a DM should ask. As like a quick kind of wrap up, listing it really quick. Pretty much ask about limits. What kind of limits players kind of have in terms of social and political engagement, especially if you guys may include some of those themes into your games. Because as much as people say that they don't want to deal with politics at times, they don't want to deal with certain social things. stories in general are driven off conflict, and those social and political things naturally find themselves into these stories. And it's not to avoid those; it's just to find where the limit is on where you can include them and how much it is. So, because obviously, we all want a level of escape, but if we're gonna play in a political game or there's war, there's like war involved. Well, like in Ebron, it's a Cold War setting, pretty much. It's post World War, and the countries are kind of in this stalemate. Well, there's a lot of political intrigue that you can play with a lot of that. What level of comfortability you're going to be able to do with that? Ravnica is another one, for example. That stated campaign can be very, very political because it's about class structure. Each guild is pretty much these megacorps, and the people that live in the city are depending on especially what race, what culture you are within that world, will determine your hierarchy in there. How much do you want to play into that? How comfortable are you going to play with those themes of race? Finding those boundaries. Also, anything to do with trauma. After you kind of set that, um, overall in the meta situation, what kind of game and adventure everybody's going to want to play? How much do homebrew rules is another thing. What homebrew rules as a DM do you like to introduce that you feel have fun, and what is comfortable for the players to actually do? Because that's going to vary from table to table. Some people, like everybody here, I think, has a variation on inspiration. Something as simple as that. How we run inspiration is going to be different. Critical damage rolls too, stuff like that. And what level of homebrew is acceptable, and then that's when you can pitch what is going to work. Then after that, it's like those are the main two things I would say, or as a DM. And on top of that, well, yeah, what game do you guys want to play? What style of game do you guys want to play? And also address what type of games you're comfortable running as a DM. Because again, it's also your level of fun too. Is also important at the table. You're also a player at the game. And I guess we'll switch over to players. What should a player come in on session 0 and ask their DM?
All right, I've got a lot of ideas for this one. All right, what kind of deities and like greater powers are in the world, and how do they interact with mortals? Like, if I'm a cleric, what is that going to look like? What do paladin oaths look like? Are there factions for these groups that are kind of defined by character classes, or is my character class unique in the world, or is there like 100 paladins in every town, and just a paladin is just like a fighter with a holy symbol? Like, I don't know. Like how common am I special? Are there factions to do with my group? What kind of locations and people might my character's backstory feed into that maybe you could kind of front load me, so when those things come up, I know that that's a cue. Oh, that's from my backstory. I need to engage with that. What's the magic level of this setting that we're going to play in? Is it high magic or low magic? How common is an anti-magic field? Does every bank have one? Or is it like reserved for just like the king's throne room? Or are there none? That's a great thing to know about. What's the DM style and what's the genre we're going to be playing in if the DM hasn't said so? Is there going to be downtime? Like, am I going to be able to craft things? DM, if I bring a crafting system, will you let me use it? And I'll just kind of ask as needed how it works, but I can kind of do it all myself. Can I do that? Is there going to be downtime? Anything nuanced with your character concept? Like, if you're playing a thief rogue, you say, which of the 5 different ways that alchemist fire could be resolved are you going to use, DM? Just so that I know how I'm going to calculate that damage. If I'm playing an enchanter, can people see someone I've enchanted because their eyes are dilated, or there's like Tinkerbell dust around their head so they know that they're charmed? Is it going to be evident to people? Those sorts of things need to be asked about. Don't get too much into the minutia of rules, but just ask the DM, like, hey, these little details that are specific to my character, or that I foresee happening with the other characters and stuff. Like, I see this being like something we can maybe make a decision now, so we don't have to make a decision mid-session later and like change up our build because we're like, I would have done it differently if I knew that. Get ahead of those sorts of things, and it'll go a lot smoother. So that's just real quick, a whole bunch of questions I would love to hear players ask me when I'm the DM. Oh my goodness, if they asked that, I'd be over the moon. Oh, one more thing. I forgot one more thing. So, based on the character death, like, if my character dies, do I get a new character who's just the same level, or am I like down a level, or what? How does that work? Am I going to let? And I would love to hear players ask me as the DM, hey, I have a second character concept that I think would be fun. can I give them to you as an NPC in the world so that if my character dies, I can take on that, and that character's already kind of introduced to the party through whatever's happening. And like my dad asked about doing this, and it used to be a pretty common thing, maybe you know, Phil, but the like followers often used to be someone's like B character, you know, so that sort of thing. And so
Yeah.
those sorts of questions would be really useful for you and the DM to kind of think, oh, if character death does happen, what do we do? Is it totally someone from scratch, or do you have a concept that you'll be excited for, ready to go, and it's already introduced in the world? Those are great questions to ask.
Way back in second edition, when I was in high school, we would they still had those follower mechanics in the system, so we would have just a gaggle of nobodies that would hang back at the camp, and so when we get killed, we just queue up the next guy, and it's like, oh, we lost guys, we need someone to go in to retrieve all the stuff that got abandoned there, and like that becomes the party now. And like we already have a unified goal. We already believe in the cause enough to be out there, and we have an immediate goal of get all your souls back because you got dark souled to death or whatever. So, but yeah, absolutely. I guess as a DM, I would want to hear from players all of that, just anything that let the player asking, what can I do to build a character that's going to help keep the campaign going in the direction we agreed it was going on, and what can I build in my character that's going to help reinforce everyone else's ambitions for the campaign, because I want to. But that's just me wanting to have cohesive combat teams that actually do want to give a crap about each other. That's like my dream always as a DM. But yeah, anything that the players are aware of mechanically that's going to impact their character, or if they're into character backstories. If I'm going to walk in with 4 pages of text, how likely it is any of that actually jiving with the campaign that we built in the first place? Like, hey, DM, if I wanted to have a backstory, how much of that should I actually have at first level so that I can maybe mold the world and myself into each other, so it's like a unique campaign? I'm like, oh, God bless you, thank you. Yeah, give me like a quick bullet list of things that are important to you, like no more than 3, and then we'll build on that. And like,
That's another good point. I don't think a lot of players realize is a lot of DMs are totally okay with you building your backstory as you go. I wonder if some players think like whatever you have at the beginning is all you get, lock it in. But sometimes if you have an idea along the way, tell your DM, and tell your DM or you as a DM tell your players at the beginning, hey, it's okay if your backstory develops as we go. Just talk to me and say, hey, I had this idea to build it out more. Let's talk about it. You just inspired me just now. That's a good point.
God, like all those heist RPG games that have like the backstory or like the flashback mechanism, where it's like I'm going to spend some of my resources and I can quickly narrate how I had prepped for this specific trap that I didn't know about until the DM sprung it on me. It's like, oh my God, this pit trap, I'm going to spend a resource point, and now I can pretend I knew it was there. And these are all the things I did to give me advantage on my die roll now that I'm doing this. Like having that same backstory approach of, oh, I see that we're fighting Boros a whole lot in this Ravnica campaign. How about when I level up, or the next time we gain our rank in our organization, I build out new background hooks inside of Boros, like I know a spy in there, and now I can gain access to resources in there. It's like, yeah, being able to organically build your character around it is like the hugest compliment you can give to a DM. Is like, I'm paying attention to your game, and I'm seeing how my own personal fantasy narrative is going to be able to play into the larger scope, and then it becomes like really like beyond unique to their experience being there. Like no one else will ever be able to have that. It's really just precious. Anyway.
Yeah, pretty much you guys hit both on one of the things I wanted to say. Players should definitely ask how much backstory they should bring. Some DMs just want bullet points. They don't need a 4-page essay detailing, your character's great grandparents' history that leads them to like the tree that they live under. They don't really need that. Give them bullet points. I write in a bullet point style, like, here's are the major events. This is why my character acts the way they act. And then whatever happens in the campaign from there, that's continuing their story. You don't need to know, your character's blood type, their mother's maiden name at time. Like, you don't need to know all those nitty-gritty details. You only need to know the info that's going to, or only need to provide the info that's going to dictate and correlate with the current campaign you're playing. So DMs some DMs like a super massive backstory, and for those DMs, you're awesome and you have the time. But for DMs like me, give me bullet points. I'm good. Like just give me the highlights. Let me know major things that you want to see happen, and I can weave them into there. Um, uh, Jordan, you hit on like a lot of them. What factions are in play in the game? Deities are in play in the game. I think some of the meta stuff is what classes, subclasses are off the table or on the table, or even then, what classes, subclasses are really going to be linked into the campaign, or actually a lot more important that the DM wish somebody would pick up and play. Um, just so that they know that there's certain story elements that the DM may want to be hitting on in terms of the major meta narrative. I think too much at times players come into a session zero with a character planned 100%, and that might not always be the right call. What race options are on the table and what actually doesn't fit into the world is also another thing, because there's oftentimes somebody's like, I want to play a Tabaxi or a Leonin or Tiefling, and then you're playing in Ravnica and none of those things exist, and you're just like, yeah, it doesn't fit within the setting, but I guess we kind of have to let you do it because that's what you're gonna have fun. So I think for a player, it's good to build towards the table and build towards the world to kind of fit into it. Okay, Eric said, what if you have 5 players and they decide all their characters are identical quintuplets? Well, everybody's a bard, I'm assuming. 5-player bard group or 5-player cleric group. Hey, we're good to go. 5-player artificer group. There you go. We got everything handled.
Just give them a BBEG or a rival group that also has a quintuplet group.
Yep.
Either Powerpuff Girls versus the Beat 'em Up Boys, whatever it was, the boy version of them.
Yeah. Other than that, like as a player, it's okay to kind of go in. This is more advice. Go in without really having too much planned. With your character, you kind of just kind of go in blind. I think it's a perfectly fine way. Also, the advice of like building your backstory as you guys continue to play is perfectly well within reason. I did that with my current character I'm playing because I pretty much just rolled him up as like I want to play Fire Wizard, and eventually he evolved and became an artificer. So, and I reshaped and redid his background based off of events of the game because it just was more impactful. So yeah. Other than that, a lot of stuff we kind of covered already.
Can I make one more point, Josh?
Yeah, go for it.
There was one time when I made a character who I really wanted to play. It was an evil enchantment wizard in disguise sort of thing, hiding his motives. And first session of we kind of did a practice session because there was a lot of new players and it was with a bunch of coworkers. And it became evident to me that I was like, this is not the group and the campaign for me to play this character. And I switched to what was at the time one of the UA artificer, just like throw little bombs and stuff. And I was like, I'll try that out. And it was so much more fun. And I'm so glad that I switched. And so as a player, like, don't think like, oh, they made it so I can't play the character I want. Like, there will be another game. You will find the game where you will enjoy that character the most. Don't feel like you just have to shoehorn in what you wanted to play. Just make the one that's going to be fun for this one.
Yeah, actually, that brings up another question. As a player, ask the other players what the hell they want to play. What roles are they seeing they play? Because some players, like even in my play group, I'm playing with the same group of guys for a while. Everybody at that table approaches how they develop and play their character differently. So during session 0, that's pretty much the one question I asked everyone, whether I'm player or DM. What the hell do you guys want to play? What roles do you want to see playing? For example, my brother wants to always play the character that hits things. He's very much a martial-centered player. He'll develop some backstory, but in reality, it's like, what's the thing that's going to let me be the frontliner or just let me hit things a lot? So his 3 classes are go-to: Barbarian, Fighter, Monk. So I know in that group, make sure he has a frontliner DPS role. And that for me as a player, maybe not make a character that, or have a character in mind that's going to play that role. My buddy David, he's actually in the chat right now. He likes playing stuff that blows things up. So don't play anything else that let him play that role and to be able to cause chaos and blow things up, and then everybody else we kind of fit and mold into what they're wanting to do. I've had a cleric character on the back burner for like 3 campaigns already because everybody else has been wanting to play a cleric of some kind at some point. So yeah, like what Jordan said, eventually you get to play those characters. Just patience too. And it's if you can't play one character, doesn't mean you can't pull another one out of your box just to bring it to the game that fits a lot more with the campaign and the group that you're playing in.
On top of that, so my style, I don't usually look at like the different roles as much when I'm making a character. Though I do like to hear. I often say, "What does everyone else want to play?" Because I have like 100 different character concepts that would be fun for me to play. So I like to hear what everyone else would do and kind of think of something complementary in role play versus role or whatever. But sometimes when we ask each other, "Oh, like, what are you gonna play?" And as we kind of talk about it, we all kind of end up going all rogues, all rogues. And all of a sudden, like, we're all going to play rogues for this like 5-session campaign, like a mini campaign or whatever. So sometimes you get some fun things that you just find out everyone's just super into. That's a little unorthodox. So, yeah, the more you talk, the more you can find some fun moments that you didn't expect.
Yeah, and I think the last bit tidbit you hit on something too with when it comes to character building for session 0. When it comes to the narrative, just because somebody wants to play the same class or something doesn't mean you can't play it. As long as they have a different narrative niche, a narrative fantasy that you're trying to hit, it's perfectly okay to play the same class. I think mechanically and the way people structure, and I think this also stems from MMOs. It's like, nope, we got one tank, only one person plays a tank. You got one DPS, one blaster, one this and that. And there's enough character options in the game now that everybody can play. Literally, everybody can play a cleric, but depending on what cleric subclass you play will determine what role you're going to play and what narrative fantasy you're going to actually attempt to achieve within that structure. So yeah, that's another thing. Jordan, you pretty much brought up was like, yeah, whatever narrative fantasy is another way, and definitely should not restrict you from playing the same class as somebody else. Oh, and I think we want to end off on this one with from Karido. Unless you guys have any other things players should ask.
I'm good.
Okay. We'll end it off on this one. This is in regards to romance. Do you set expectation for romance? I know we have one player who doesn't feel comfortable with it, so if he doesn't like his character being flirted with, we had to communicate that early on. And then
Nope, it's always true. Romance is always spontaneous and unexpected. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, and different sexualities and stuff like that. It's worth noting. Like, let the DM know, like, hey, like I don't want romance or anything like that. Or DM, I kind of would like romance if you could find a way to throw that in. And the DM might be like, not the game for that. It's not my thing. Okay, stuff like that. It can be a brief discussion. You don't got to go into super details, but I've had people get into conflicts in game over romances because someone wanted the DM to role play a sexuality that was not their own, and they just like weren't comfortable with it, and the person was pretty mad that they wouldn't. So it does happen. So worth a question. Yep.
Yeah, this goes back to setting expectation and boundaries for your session 0. Just really understand what topics and what things players are going to be comfortable with and not comfortable with, and understand that. And that goes for the DM too. Like in Jordan's example, the DM might not be comfortable playing a character that has a different sexuality than they do, and that's perfectly fine. And like for me, I would feel the same exact way. I wouldn't be comfortable in general. I don't feel comfortable playing romantic stuff at the table, but just not my style. I don't even like my character getting flirted with. Because my character just diverts and goes, "Oh, cool! There's a door that way. I'm just gonna walk that way. Thank you, barmaid. Here's dip, and then just dip out of the bar." So but yeah, it's just whatever level of comfortability when it comes to romance, fade to black sort of sequencing when stuff is going down is perfectly fine, or just not including it at all, or if another player is perfectly fine with their character and you're not, well, just let the DM know, I don't want that for my character. I'm good. So yeah, anything for you, Phil?
Just putting a rating system on your game. Mine are PG. So if the level of interaction and relationship you can expect in the game is the same as what you could expect from a PG movie. You could really hard rail it down to G, or if your team likes that stuff, then you could ratchet it up to rated R if you wanted. But I'm like acknowledging that there are romantic relationships, acknowledging that marriages come from those romantic relationships, unless of course it's political marriage, then leave me alone. But like being able to have just enough social recognition that relationships exist, but Like I'm one of those DMs that is not comfortable with narrating any aspect of a flirtatious or romantic relationship. I immediately will drop out into third person as this person is expressing interest to you, but this is what they're asking about. But you can tell that they're actually trying to manipulate you emotionally to get that information. How do you feel about that? Or how do you want to respond to that? And like drop it as far into like disassociation as possible, because I myself am very uncomfortable with those kind of things, but I recognize they have narrative value, especially if you're trying to do some sort of espionage thing. It's like, okay, well then let's approach it tactically.
Yeah.
How are you trying to manipulate emotions, and what is your angle to get it? Well, I want to manipulate it emotionally, and I want to lead on to thinking that they're going to get more value out of the results that they're getting from this. Like, well, that sounds like a deception rule. So let's resolve it that way. And it's like, great. How's the reception rule goes? Well, you wish you had gotten more information out about it, but you're able to distract them for a few hours so that they're not at duty. Rogue, what were you planning on doing when that deception was going on? And it's kind of just like walk it through in that manner. That way you can acknowledge that these things exist without having to go to a place where it is uncomfortably depicted, which if you've been around for at least 5 or 6 years, you've probably ran into a conversation or an event at a table where it starts getting really uncomfortable. So like that's like I'm like, as a DM in general, I try to stay in third person as much as possible so that I don't have to change my narrative tone when I'm explaining something to you in game or out of game, or when I'm addressing you as characters. Is like, yeah, the captain of the guard is getting really interested in what you guys have underneath that tarp, so is trying to edge in closer, asking difficult questions like, why are you coming to our city? Like being able to maintain that same disassociation so that when things change gears, it doesn't have to break a beat for me as much. So
My dad would really like playing with you, Phil, because I do more of the role playing, and sometimes he just wants to say exactly what you said, like, oh, I want to do this, and he doesn't want to like role play it out, and that's like his comfort zone. And
Yeah.
so yeah, a lot of people like that. I like a mix personally, where sometimes I'll be role playing and I'll be like, I don't know if it's coming across, but like you just said, like they're trying to emotionally manipulate you. How do you feel about that? Like I think that's a great tool. One, to disassociate, like you said, when you're uncomfortable. So if anyone switches to third person all of a sudden, everybody note that is a tell that they might be uncomfortable with what's happening.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks for calling that out. God,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. An immediate change in like crossing their arms all of a sudden after somebody says something, just like spend a few minutes on YouTube searching like how can I read body signals? Like if you're going to be running a narrative table and you're making eye contact with people and you're seeing shifts, that's probably the best takeaway from this whole thing, Flutes. It's like, wow, have that awareness. Well done, Jordan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, when I used to work at Starbucks, the big thing was when you're looking at customers, how to read unspoken language, body language, and stuff. Because a lot of people are not going to be, go full blown Karen and throwing drinks in your face, and will just suffer a level of discomfort they're having with your service. So yeah, reading body language, and just in general, trying to see other people's tells and when they're not comfortable is a big thing, and also is something that it's outside of the D&D realm that will actually help you in life. How to just pick up and read how people react to things, their emotional response, and nonverbal communication. And then also, what definitely would help any person in a play group is group management. This is something they teach in HR classes. This is something I, in college, went and learned. Also, for my degree, was just group management. Just some just basics. You can find that all over YouTube too. People will teach you, and that actually will help you in life too, and how to like be a more effective leader or be a more effective communicator. So yeah, that's pretty much. I think we covered it as much as we can. I know we're running a little bit longer. Eric is asking empanadas or hot pockets. The correct answer is empanadas, because why hot pockets?
I shipped my tooth on a hot pocket. That's how I got my first crown. So
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
those are out.
Yeah.
Oh,
no.
No, I did heat it up. Everyone always asks. It was heated up, but sometimes the crust is just pinched in just the right way to resist your tooth quite well.
I did that with a Cheeto. I totally know what you mean, man. Just like boom. Exploded in my mouth. Like, what the hell?
All right. And on that note, thank you guys for tuning in on this stream. Phil, where can they find you?
Phil Kearney, just like it shows in the chat window there. It's FILKEARNEY. I'm on Twitter. I'm on DeviantArt. I'm on Discord. I'm on YouTube. Click my stuff. Check out my dealio, as well as Patreon. It's all FILKEARNEY.
And then for you, Jordan.
Yeah, flutesloot.com. Find me on YouTube with Flutes Loot. And also check out our Redbubble, where my wife has a lot of different designs there. Like search for Flutes Loot on Redbubble, or go to our site and find the link there. And we also have a Patreon, so if you want to join our exclusive Discord, you may also do that. And yeah, that's me.
All right, and I updated the doobly-doo as we were talking, so you can find all the links in the description below. Also, our buddy over here, Eric, Fry Minis, is doing an unboxing tonight at 7 p.m., I believe, Central Time, which will be about 4 o'clock Pacific Time. So yeah, go definitely check him out. I believe it's, what are you doing, Eric? Is it Critical Role unboxing? That's going to be fun, seeing what he thinks. I don't think Eric is super familiar with Critical Role, but they have some actually pretty cool minis. Well, I think they're working with Steamforged Games and WizKids now, so they have some pretty cool stuff. What I got going on this week? Wednesday, I dropped a character build for the character I'm currently playing in my campaign, a level 14 build that I finally pushed past level 10. So we went 4 levels deeper. And then hopefully I can do a follow-up on my general experience playing a high-level artificer in a high-level campaign as soon as the campaign ends.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know. I love my character. I just don't care for the artificer design-wise. I've been putting my design hat on a lot lately, and I'm just like, man, I really don't like how they design the artificer. I love the narrative and everything behind it. I just don't like how they put it together. And then what else do we got going on? Luchador is coming soon. It's happening. I'm getting art assets. I'm heavily writing a bunch of stuff. It's soon. I can feel it, and then so you guys can take it to Spelljammer and Radiant Citadel when it's ready. That's the plan. I'm hopefully getting a test document within the next coming weeks. So yeah. Next week, another character build based off of Radiant Citadel. Hint, you're going to be able to play some sort of musician inspired by one of the cultures in that book. It's going to be awesome. And other than that, that's all I got going on. Next week, I'll figure out what the heck we're going to do a live stream on. It might be on a Sunday. It might be on a Saturday. We'll see. And then the following week, I might have to take a day off. We'll see. But again, until next time, guys, check everybody out here. Go ahead and go show them support. Go show support to Jordan, to Phil. Their links are in the description. Go check out Eric's stream later in the day. And until next time, you guys have a good one and take care.
It was fun. Thanks a lot.
Bye, everybody.
Anyways, Jordan.